Cool. So this is part 2 of what we started. I want to say last week, but really, in reality, we just took like a 10-minute break. I don't even think 10 minutes. So there's a part 1 to this whole thing of like our favorite artists and artists that inspire us and why they're our favorite artists in certain ways. So
I think we did 3 already.
We did 3 each, and now we're going to do 4 to finish things off, 4 each. So that's where we're at. We talked, like the first part was like really, we spent a bunch of time kind of talking about generalities before we got into the artist.
Yeah, that's true.
So besides the fact that we talked about some of our favorites in the first part, I would just recommend going to the first one anyway.
Yeah.
Because we talked more about what that kind of means to maybe be inspired by artists and things like that. And then we get into specifics after.
Yeah, not necessary, but probably would be.
Absolutely, 100% necessary.
Yeah.
Go back and listen to all the podcasts we've ever done. I think there's only like 4, so listen to all 100% necessary. So I'm gonna start this one, and it's Rothko. So I was mentioning after the first like half or whatever installment of this with the podcast for. I want to keep saying last week. Anyway.
Yeah. It's probably good to say last week.
Or the part 1.
Yeah.
Part 1. I was saying that the ones I mentioned there were mostly aesthetic, and now in my last half that I have here, they're more conceptual and inspired me in different ways. Rothko is kind of like the bridge, because
I can see that.
Yeah, like for me as someone who does a lot of abstract art. The work that I've seen of Rothko's, and the thing is, he didn't get brought up that much in my university. Like, it just didn't, my university experience just didn't have him being mentioned that much, which I think was weird, just because of the work that I was doing, and I would have figured the work that my professors would have, I don't necessarily compare our stuff, but if they had mentioned checking him out, I would have.
I can actually see a connection. Like as soon as you brought up that name, I like totally could see a connection.
Okay.
Like you say, I wouldn't say it's like, oh, your stuff looks just like that.
Yeah.
But I can completely see a connection. Absolutely.
Well, that's good. It's not a bad thing at all.
No, I think he's great, and I do remember him being, even though I wasn't in painting, I do remember him being brought up quite a bit when we would do critiques and stuff like that.
Yeah, and like I said, I wish he was brought up earlier so I could have seen his work earlier. Mm-hmm. I think it wasn't until I'd heard the name at some point and didn't know what work he did, so I didn't know it was worth looking up. But Mark Maron, Rothko's like his favorite artist, and so I was like, I need to look into that. But the way he was talking about it, I'm like, you know, abstract work? How do I not know? Like I knew the name, but I didn't know what he was attached to, like as an artistic movement or whatever. So I was like, okay.
So you mean you've only lately really looked into Rothko?
Like 4 years ago.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
After I was done university,
Oh.
It was like 4 years ago that I heard the name through Mark Maron, and he started talking about how much he loved his work. Because at that time he started like dating an artist, and so I was just like, who?
I've always wanted to see her work. Haven't you?
I've never looked it up.
I know.
Don't think
Every
so.
time I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh, I should look up her work, and then I never do.
I don't think maybe I did, but I forgot about it already. So. So the reason it's the bridge for me is because, like, it didn't inform my abstract work at all because I didn't see it, or my early work and why I started doing abstracts or whatever. And this is actually going to go into something else, but I don't know why I need to say that. I should just say it. Anyway, the reason it's this bridge, I feel, is because, like, it's not just aesthetic quality. I really have lately, since seeing more of his work and being exposed to it, I feel like his color is so much more calculated. The way that he does things is not the way that I was doing my abstracts, and a lot of mine still aren't that way. I love color, and I play with color, but it's not like I'm mixing a very specific shade that will... Because usually most of his paintings have like 2 colors, and that's like it. It's like a rectangle.
And he uses oils, I think, too.
Yeah.
Which is different.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But just the way that he plays with them is not like... I'm like, these colors go well together. I just like start... This one influences that one and whatever, and I just do it. But I really like... And I don't know if he was part of the color field abstract movement or not, but...
He was just after that, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's not just one color. It's usually 2, but I mean, it's like just putting a rectangle or like a swatch on top of another which takes up the whole painting. It's like 90% one color usually, and then like a swatch in like the bottom 10% or whatever. And I just really like how calculated and just like working with like one hue in a certain way, like, and it makes me want to slow down a little bit because I appreciate that a lot, and I don't think I would say it's not naturally what I've done, but it doesn't mean that it wouldn't come natural for me to do at some point.
I feel like that piece that you did that was like the buildings, you know, the sort of
the
little one with the buildings. Yeah. I felt like, even though that's not the same at all.
It doesn't look like it.
No, it doesn't look like it, but when you were creating it, I felt like you were kind of doing
that.
That it was slow. It was so slow, it was purposeful, the colors, the shading. Yeah. Like, just watching you do that to me was so different than any of your other work. Yeah. And it did feel sort of, like you say, you'd slow down, and it was, like you said, it doesn't look anything like his work, but it was definitely a different thing for you. Yeah. And you played with color a lot too.
Yeah. Well, I think that the other thing is that the scale of his work allows. I'm like, I feel like the bigger it is, the simpler it can be. Yeah. Because I feel like if I were to make something that's simple, really small, I'm like, this is nothing. Like, that's how I feel personally. I'm like, I don't like, as an audience or as a viewer, I'm like, what is this? This is the little red square. Like,
I get what you're saying.
I tend, like, it's large work because I'm so attracted to excess. That it definitely attracts me more than like smaller work. There's smaller work that I really love, but it's usually because it's so detail oriented in such a small space. Whereas if it was simple in a small space, it just doesn't attract me that much. Yeah. But like I said, on the grand scale, like I would love to work bigger too. And I think that maybe if I did work bigger, I wonder if I think I'd start feeling pressure to have a lot of movement and to have a lot of stuff that's filling the space in a certain way. But if I thought about it, I'm like, maybe I could do this like Rothko and just really calculate how I'm going to do what I'm going to do.
We need to make a list of all these things we have to do.
It's all up there.
All up there. Oh, yeah. The youth of you, being able to just keep it in your mind.
No, there's things that I completely forget about. So, I mean, like, doing this is good practice. Like, that's why we always talk about, like, it's good practice whenever we have a conversation. It's just like, oh, yeah, I need to do that. I need to do this. I need to do that. So I do need to write this stuff down because I'm reminded of these ideas I've had that have escaped me for months and months and months because I wasn't talking about it. So compiling this list has been good for me. Yeah. And the thing that I was thinking of that's more of a general thing that I didn't get to before, but this reminded me of, like, I brought up, like, doing my BFA and stuff a couple times now, and one thing that my senior professor always said, who are you looking at? Who are you looking at? Who are you looking at? And I was always so annoyed because I'm like, dude, I'm not looking at anybody. Like, I was reading art magazines because I liked reading them, but they weren't influencing me in that way, and they still don't to this day. When I read something, it influences me sometimes, like, oh wow, like they think about process in this way that I wasn't thinking about it, but it's never like, oh, I'm looking at this person and therefore my work is influenced this way, which is what he meant, because I think a lot of people, that's how it was working for them. Like,
well, and I guess that's why when we started, like on the first part, I was saying that the influence isn't necessarily I'm going to try, although with that Yoko Ono and then the piece I did, there's kind of a lot more of maybe a direct correlation, but the inspiration to me is the permission or something, or, you know, to be able to do something else rather than, like you say, I'm going to paint a Rothko. Like, that's not what you mean. Although I do think sometimes just copying something can be important for, like, the first try to do something. It probably will never be the same because you're doing it, not him. But I mean, I think that can be a way to start. But I think what we're talking about is a different way to take inspiration. But what your professor was trying to say was look at it. You know, I think hopefully what the professor was saying is look at a bunch of stuff because that's going to.
Well, it's just during critique he would ask, like, whoever's turn it was, he's like, who are you looking at?
Right.
And I'm like, and I just always, I didn't know how to answer. I'm like, dude, I'm not looking at anybody. Right. Because everything that I've often said before, like with you and other people, that I'm like, I don't look at art history that much. I'm not like, I hate research of any kind. So, I shouldn't say that. I hate research. hate formal research.
Yeah.
So to me, reading is research, but I'm doing it because it entertains me, and I learn and I grow from it very organically. I'm not like, let me go into Rothko's process, let me see what he did, let's see how many layers and what mediums he used, and like blah, blah, blah. That stuff bores me to tears. I can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't. And that's why my work looks the way it does, is because it's about immediate satisfaction so much. And that's not always a good thing, but that's my process, and that's why my stuff is the way it is. But no, he would ask, like, who were you looking at? Because there was a direct correlation of, like, with most people, I've been looking at a lot of this person, and that's why I'm using this color palette. Yeah. That's why I'm trying oil pastels with my acrylics. That's why I'm doing this. And like I said, at the time, I really hated that question. I could never answer it. I'm like, dude, I'm just living life, and, like, I'm not looking, like, it's...
I used to hate it when I did something and then someone would come and say, oh, that's just like so-and-so's. And it's true. Like, there isn't really anything new. The whole postmodern thing, right? Nothing's new. And so, but I thought I was doing this original thing, and I was doing it, and then, so... I
don't know. That's a whole other... I mean, we should talk about originality and stuff one day, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I need to write that down. But, you can write it down. But because that's... For me, I don't feel that way. I really don't. And, like, I don't want to... toot my own horn or what have you, but looking for your pen, and you can't, there's a marker there, but anyway, is that I didn't really felt like I never felt like I had that problem, or that I do now, where I'm like, yeah, my work kind of looks like this because that's what I've been consuming and whatever. It was, my visual art has been driven more by music and my emotions and things like that. Those play directly into the colors and the visuals and the movement and the composition more than... Yeah, I was looking at this dude's color palette and I really want to adopt that, or... I mean, there's times where I've seen something, okay, like when we were talking in part one of, like, soap, I'm like, I should use vinyl records to do that. That is a very rare instance where another artist influenced my physical process of doing something. But like I said, it's rare. Mm-hmm. So no matter who I'm looking, like, I don't know. It's just, like I said, I read and look at stuff, and, or like the thing, again in part one too, which I think ended off in Lev Kessin or whatever his name is, like, I already like working thick. This pushes me to work thick even more. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that was just the thing that I had rolling around my head of, like, who are you looking at? Because it was such a, I guess it was I don't know, I didn't really talk to many of my peers. I didn't know what an art program was even supposed to be like. I just, but it was just a part of that culture, I guess, for him, that he saw it as, like, you look at stuff and then it affects your work very directly.
Well, or it's also just having that history. It's like anything. It's like biking. It's like whatever. It's taking in what you see other people do, where they go, how they do this, how they do that. So the more you research and look at, and I think you do that a lot with biking, then you get other ideas, and you get, like you say, with the other paintings, because you've seen those, it's something now you can push in your own work. And so, to me, that would be what your professor was trying to say, is like, what are you looking at? You need to see this so that you can see inspiration, that you can push your work more. At least that's how I take it. But I'm like, I love researching. Like, I miss right now school. Like, I used to, though, when I was in school and having to write a paper, I would, like, put off the paper. I would just, like, put off the write. Maybe I better research more. Just, yeah. But I love researching and looking into things, and so I'm a little opposite that way. But I would think that it's who are you looking at is, to be looking at what's been done before and can be done, not because you should copy it, but because it can push you.
I always felt like he was asking, who are you looking at? Because I want to know where you got inspiration for this piece.
Yeah, maybe
and maybe that was just me being really defensive, because he would ask everyone that. It wasn't just me. Yeah. But I'm like, why do you think I'm like all these other idiots around me? That's just, again, how I felt at the time. And then I'm like, why do you think I'm looking at somebody?
Yeah.
Because I wasn't. Like, there was no one that I was like...
Yeah.
And I thought about it for years since then, obviously, and I was like, dude, like...
Still bugs you.
I don't know. Like I said, it's just me being really defensive, but I mean, like, that's how I interpreted his question, was like, I want to talk about who it is you're looking at, and it was, I don't think expressed it to be insulting. Mm-hmm. It was just part of the culture, and it seemed to be a matter-of-fact thing that I was like, I'm not like that. That's not how I get inspired and how it translates into my work that way.
Well, and that's how academics are, right? That's kind of when you're going through the academy, when you're going through university, that's kind of what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be you just going through and just doing your own work and not looking at anything else. You're supposed to be able to see different things, see different artists, see what's going on, doing your own work. Like that's part of being in an academy.
Well, I think
right?
the research aspect, but I don't remember like.
I'm just saying, I know you didn't do it that way. I'm just saying that's what university is meant to push.
And it's not the thing, like, and we'll get to, I think it'll be my last person where we'll talk about it as to when I finally did research somebody and how it really affected me. I maybe should have done more research then, like more formal research. There you go. Anyway, who's next?
Sorry.
No, it's good.
Okay, my next one is Louise Bourgeois. I always am scared that I'm saying her name wrong. Bourgeois, it might be bourgeois. Probably is. What?
We haven't gotten to the end yet, but I just realized something right now and I don't want to forget.
Okay.
So far, all of your artists have been female.
Yeah.
And all of mine have been male. And I wonder if we're going to end up that way. I wonder if that's how it will. Anyway, so sorry, what's the name again? Louise?
Bourgeois.
Okay.
Bourgeois. One of the things that maybe a lot of people might recognize of her are her huge spiders. So she has a huge spider at the Art Gallery of Canada.
Yeah.
A huge spider out. She's got a bunch of them in different places. So that was kind of some of her later work. And I mean, just this like huge insect that a lot of people are kind of afraid of, and just making it this huge size. And she did so many amazing things over her life. She never got caught in one single sort of way. She started with like drawings and then did sort of these very abstract wood sculptures. She moved on to doing installations, these really complex room installations. She did performances where she had sort of all these breasts on and different things like that. She later in her life sort of did these stuffed body type forms, and she did all these amazing different things. She made a lot of phallic penises, huge ones. There's a great picture of her like in an art gallery holding this like huge phallic granite penis that she sculpted. It was very slick and she did a lot of those. So it was really, really varied. It always obviously was feminist, very sexual though, and always pushing boundaries. The spiders, I just love them so much. And I love the scale of them. I just like how she took up space. She's one of the first people that kind of had her like a big, huge retrospective of her work, that kind of thing. She just seemed, I've heard her in different interviews, and she just seems super cool. Once I got to know her work, it's funny, my stepdaughter gave me a book for Christmas called Women, I think, by Annie Leibovitz, and it was all these pictures that she took of all these different women that were famous and not famous. And one of my favorite ones was of this hand, and it was so like the skin kind of came down, like it was as if the skin had been like you just pushed it on something and the skin kind of stayed. And then I found out it was Louise Bourgeois' hand, which it kind of made sense, like maybe it was from sculpting, I don't know, but it looked beautiful. It was just this profile of this hand. Anyways, that's kind of an aside. I like her, and I'm inspired by her for what she did. I like the variance of what she did. I like that she, like the different performances that she did. To me, there always is maybe something fun in there in a way, but also something that like really cuts through, and sometimes can be, carrying around a big black granite penis at a gallery. Like, who does that? And she was this little tiny French woman. Anyways, she died in 2010, so she was still alive when I really got interested in her, which is around 2004. Okay. So that was kind of exciting for me. I don't know, I guess. But I'm not going to say too much more about it. I find her, she's just always someone I've gravitated towards, and I like her work, and I like that she didn't let herself be pigeonholed into a certain thing. And she obviously did some really great feminist things. Online there is, and I think it's even where you can do tours of her studio, which it looks really cool. But online you can go and see, and they have pictures of her studio, which just looks like a really cool place. It would have been a cool place to be. She had people that worked for her at the end of her life, you know, where she did a lot of the creating and then had someone else make it, because I think she was in her 90s when she died.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so that's just one of my. I really like her. She does cool stuff, and I love her spiders.
You said
I'm gonna go see your spider. I'm going to Ottawa in less than a week, and I'm gonna make sure I go down and see the spider at the Art Gallery of Canada. So I'm excited.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say that you said one phrase that really stuck out to me was that you love the way she took up space.
Yeah.
So I could take that in more than one way, so I don't know how you meant it exactly.
Well, like these huge spiders, right? Like, so they're in a space. Like, they are like 20 feet tall.
So, like, her use of space.
And her use of space.
Okay.
Like, she physically took up space. Her herself, she was a teeny weeny little thing. But she, I mean, her installations were these big, like, rooms that you couldn't go into. They were kind of like gated off, but there was so much in them. And then, you know, it's not that everything was like that. Definitely. But I did like when she did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I only knew the spiders. That's all I knew of hers. But.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of, I think, especially because they are so kind of iconic, and because we do have one at, you know, the Art Gallery of Canada. But her work all along is interesting. Like, she's definitely worth going and having a look and getting kind of lost in her work. It's interesting. She has cool things to say. And it's so varied. So I like that, because I do that. I do installation and photography and performance. And so like there again, there's that permission. So it was like, I can do anything I want. Like, I can say it in this voice, and now I can say it in that voice. Yeah. And so
not being boxed in. And
no, that this is what you do. You're a photographer, and that's what you do, right? So yeah. So there's many ways to be able to have your voice and say things. So I think she's left a great legacy.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about my first non-visual artist, the only one that's not a visual artist in my thing, because I was thinking, when I asked you, it wasn't because I had anyone in mind. I was like, wait, I was just curious. And then I started thinking about, could I have writers, could I have, when I was like directors, I was like Stanley Kubrick and like whatever. But I settled on Trent Reznor.
Fair.
Specifically 9 Inch Nails.
Yeah.
And it's something, for me, it was the first musical artist, and I'm just going to say artist, because if you know enough about 9 Inch Nails, it was, for decades, it was him with like hired people, and only in the past couple of years, he was like, you know what, Atticus Ross, you're an official member of 9 Inch Nails, because they've been working together for so long. But anyway, so, yeah. It was the first musical artist or band or whatever that I realized was art. Like, I didn't think of music as art until I heard 9 Inch Nails. And that was before I was doing any visual art. It was just like, wow, this is just art. Like, I just realized that one day. And before I even really defined art for myself, but I was like, this is not just music, is how I felt. And it wasn't because it was the only music that gave me some feeling or deep feeling or something, but I was like, everything seemed so, and it's very opposite, I think, like, very opposite of the way that I create a lot of my work. I'm not very calculated, I don't have much patience, I don't do much planning, but I feel like everything he does is so meticulous, and all these little things, just sound bites and samples and like layers and textures, and everything is so opposite to the way that I work visually, but his music has inspired and been a soundtrack to more visual art than any other musical artist has for me. So it's definitely a source of, like I said, of inspiration directly into pieces. Sometimes it's one song that is just turns out being a visual art piece for me, or it's just like a certain mood I'm in where it's just the soundtrack. So I've had numerous pieces where I'm like, this piece expresses the feeling of this one song. Whereas with, I think, probably every other musical artist that has inspired my work, it's been like an album or like I'll take the lyrics or titles from a couple different songs, and it's more about the feeling like that an album gives me, or the feeling that the whole artist gives me throughout the span of albums. Whereas with his work, one song I can take and be like.
But you're taking his song and making it art. But you're also saying that his song is art.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think the way that he creates music, for the most part, it's just like I never felt like, and it's.
Are you emulating the feeling, or are you taking the vibe and what you're getting from that piece of art, and then using that feeling to create something?
Both, because so sometimes it's been like 99% of the time I'm creating art, I have music. And that somehow feeds into what I'm doing a little bit. Even if it's like a portrait or a landscape, it still somehow influences what I'm doing because it gives me a certain energy that I'm working in.
Mm-hmm.
But especially with abstracts, and sometimes I end up, like I said, naming the piece whatever the mood that the music is giving me. So it is a soundtrack for what I'm doing, but it also becomes a little more than that. His stuff sometimes goes even more than that, where like I said, it's one piece. Like I'm thinking of The Background World is one. There's one song, and I just had that one song just on repeat, on repeat, on repeat, on repeat. I didn't get tired of it while I was painting, and I felt like the feeling that song, like the relationship of me and that song ended up being expressed on that canvas. So it gets to that level, but I just feel like separate from how it inspires my work and how I feed off of it, despite that, like I said, before I did any visual art, his work was the first music that I was like, this is art, because even before, like I said, it's grown. My appreciation has grown so much, and not because like his music is getting better and better, because I listen to older stuff more often, and there's a certain era of his that I go back to way more, but things that, like, texture is something that people talk about with music sometimes, and I feel like with his, it's very textured, very layered. Like I said, his precision and meticulousness doesn't feel meticulous to me. Like it doesn't bother me. Like everything's too. Like I don't know how to explain it. It's smooth and it goes together. And the parts that are jarring are meant to be jarring. And like, anyway, that's that's him, Trent Reznor. Just like I said, mostly within Nine Inch Nails, but there's other stuff he's done, like How to Destroy Angels or soundtracks that he's done that still provide me with inspiration. But I just think he's brilliant. I just think he's an amazing musical artist, and like I said, it's directly I've fed off of his music to create pieces. It wasn't like I was like, I'm going to paint the background world today. I just didn't know, and I started listening, and then I got stuck, and I was like, I just got stuck in the one song. Or there was another one that was based off of The Day the World Went Away. And I was just like, that one song gives me such a specific mood that none of his other work can do. And I just sat in that space with that song and painted. But, yeah.
Cool. I haven't been able to really tie music with painting, which is odd to me because music's super important to me. Yeah. But like you'll often say when we're in the studio, what do you want to hear? And I'm just sort of like, I don't listen to the words. Like I don't like, it is definitely sort of in this backgrounding and it's not affecting me.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure why that is. It kind of surprises me. But anyway. My next one is a guy.
Oh, there we go.
Andy Warhol.
There we go.
Yeah. Imagine you thought he was going to be there, right?
That was the one. I was like, it's gotta be. It's gotta be.
Well, I just love, and I didn't want to like him because he's like so popular, right? He's like everyone likes Andy Warhol. So for the longest time, I didn't admit that I liked him, and I sort of didn't want to like him. But he's just, the more I got to know him, the more documentaries I watched, I just really just sort of fell in love with his way of working. So I like his cheekiness. I like how he sort of always lived his life in this as this character in a way. Like, and it seems like people who knew them, the way they talk about him, he always was this character. I mean, he wore his wig. Later on, he had like sort of all of that stuff. So he sort of lived in that character of like, I don't know, like everything's art. Like I was just doing it because it was like handy. Like You know, like everything was sort of this, I didn't think about it, like what? Like what do you want to know from me? Like what do you get from it? Yeah. So he never wanted to explain anything. He never talked that way, and he was just really, his statements are always banal, as if he was so bored to be there, but he wanted to be everywhere, yeah. Right? Like, he wanted to be seen, but then as soon as he was seen, he was like, oh, this is so boring. Like, I didn't mean to do anything. So he sort of, I like that sort of play with, and he was sort of, the first person was this art star, right? Like, where he was create art, and he was seen everywhere, and he was, you know, there were other people that were popular in art, but he really sort of made this star. I mean, it's 15 minutes of fame thing, right? And so he definitely sort of had a persona, that he presented to the world, and that it seems like he presented most of the time. He kind of cultivated that early once he got going, and I like that challenge to art and what is art, who is the artist, how are they the artists. So he had a ton of people that did the prints for him. So half the time he didn't even get any ink on his hands, right? So he had his place that was the factory. So very much, you know, just that name in itself was just this like, we're just turning out art and we're just making art, and he was making a ton of money, but again, he was sort of almost cheeky about it, and it was a place. I mean, I wish I could have been at the factory, and like it appeals to me so much, like this big art space where with big couches and stuff, and like people, you know, go and stay and hang out and get drunk and whatever, you know, and there's all these great conversations. Everything's videotaped, and in those days it was all on film, right? And there was just sort of art happening all around. It was happening all the time, and it was day or night, and there was all kinds of different artists there. And so this idea of this space that's art, like, and all of these people that come in, like, it's almost to me like the factory was an installation, and for all those years, and sort of what happened. And I had an art studio close to beside this one, that we tried to do that. We sort of set it up. It had different things where collectives came in there. We kind of worked in there, and because it just appealed to me so much of having this space where you just come, and in a way we have that, like, as a duo-ship, like as studio mates, it's kind of that way, like, come in, there's an atmosphere in there that's different when there's one person. So I can't imagine this big space where you're creating, right, and influencing each other, and I don't know, so that just really appeals to me. And then one of his pieces that I really like is where he videotaped people, and he just not videotaped, that's wrong, put them on film, but they were just sitting there, and so they're just sitting there not saying anything, you know, but because they're sitting there, all of a sudden they sort of shift in their seat, or their face changes, or they kind of giggle because they're self-conscious. And some of them are like 30 minutes, 45 minutes long.
It's a long time.
It is. And you know what? I'm transfixed by them. Like, and I don't know why, because really it's just someone sitting there, but watching just how they change and squirm and sometimes want to talk and that sort of thing. I don't know. I just thought they were great. I think they were called like film portraits, or I don't know, I don't remember what they're called. But I just thought those were lovely, and I've kind of always wanted to emulate that. Well, like, actually not even emulate, like physically, like copy it, just to see sort of what would happen with different people I know, and yeah, giving no instruction, just asking someone to sit there on film. But what else did I write down? Yeah, I think that's it. So I mean, I really love the idea of kind of this personality that he was, and you know, putting that out there. I love the idea of the factory, like that, just that whole space, and granted, you know, the time that it was in and stuff like that. I don't know if it could happen now, but I don't know, it just seemed, and he has all kinds of things, like when you watch his bibliographies, he's got all kinds of things that were really rotten of him, like all of us have, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. So definitely an influence, definitely just somebody I really like, and I like cheeky artists, and I think he was. And so yeah.
I think it's a perfect segue into the artist I'm going to talk about next, but we've talked about Andy like a bunch, and part of it was like, no, it's not a bad thing, but it was just that when we talked about conceptual art, when we talked about what is art and stealing art,
Yeah.
that it was just like that he challenged what art is and could be and why, and made people think about that kind of thing, but in this really cheeky way.
Yeah.
And the thing that you said is he was a character. Like he lived his character to such a degree that that it was just him.
Yeah.
And to me, it was almost like he lived as art in a way. Like he put on a character,
exactly.
and he was just, which is just, I'm sure a lot of it was himself, but I don't know. And it was just an exaggerated version of himself. But that to me is one of those things that I really I like the thought of that, of being like playing a character and being that, and just like, I don't want to answer whatever, like that kind of thing is this character.
Yeah.
And just like I said, I mean, an actor can be an artist, right? So just like putting that character on and living it the way he did.
Do you feel like that? I don't know if you do. I don't think we've ever talked about it. Maybe. Like, I feel like every day when I wake up is like a character, like what I'm gonna do in that day. It's like that's the way I'll dress, or sometimes I feel shitty and I just am shitty. But like it always to me is kind of a character. Like no, you just no. Like I'm going to the shop, so I want to present this, or I'm going here, or like I sort of always feel like it's not, I wouldn't say it's a character. It's definitely not like Andy Warhol like character. But to me, and maybe that's why like fashion and clothes and makeup and hair are like super interesting to me. I'm not guided by them, but they're interesting because they can change how we feel, how we look. I never always have the same hair usually and stuff like that. Like I like to change those things up because they kind of, I don't know, give a character to I am. I'm just sort of fading away on that one.
I feel like, to me, I thought of like, I know it's not the same thing, but I always thought of George Costanza, because he's like, there's a certain point in Seinfeld where, I don't remember how it got brought up, but the fact that he had like a certain color palette and a very specific outfit for each day.
Yeah.
And he's like, this is morning mist. And he's like, Jerry was just like, what? And he's like, yeah, this is a different George than yesterday. This is morning mist George. Yeah. And I was like, yeah.
I kind of feel like that. Sometimes more so than others, but yeah.
Yeah, the character thing and the factory thing, like I said, is perfect segue into David Cho. For me.
Yeah.
So,
right. Yeah.
And the notion of celebrity as well, the artist as celebrity, I feel like David Cho is just I don't want to say a sensitive topic. I just feel he's very polarizing, he's very controversial. To me, he is the most contemporary example of a celebrity artist. I
hate to like him.
And I love to love him.
Maybe that's what I mean.
Him.
I hate to love him. That's what mine is. Yeah.
And I completely understand why. Whereas I'm just like, he's such a jackass that I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
It's not like he's a role model that I aspire to. There's part of me that wishes I could live his life because I know that I can't.
Yeah.
And like, or not because I know that I can't, but I mean like it's just I don't know. It's far away from what I'm currently living, and to me it resembles freedom. So rather than talking about his work, it's more, and that's what reminded me of like when you talked about Andy, and I'm thinking of like him as a character. Like Andy had a lot of important work. I don't feel like a lot of David Cho's physical pieces are important pieces. To me, what I love is the way that he lives and the character that he exudes, that he expresses to be. And he has done tons of different things, from TV shows to his graffiti to these murals to these little tiny watercolors, like whatever. So his visual art, like I like some of his visual art for sure. It's not that I don't like his pieces, but that's not what attracts me to him being one of my favorite artists. It's the fact that he lives seemingly reckless and without care of what people think.
Yeah.
And like I said, he has enough financial freedom, I was going to use the word freedom. He has enough like money to feel like, I mean, I think it enables him to act in negative ways that I'm like, I wish I could do that, but I mean, I have to be civil to people and think about a future employer or whatever, right?
Yeah, he doesn't have to worry about employment.
No, and it's the thing, he resembles a certain type of freedom to me that sometimes I wish I had, and like, it's I don't think he's necessarily a great person. I don't think he's a horribly destructive, abusive to everyone around him person either, but I know that there are certain parts of him that...
What about his podcast?
Oh, yeah,
so that's... What about his?
Which one?
I guess
Koreans
the one
Gone
I know...
Bad?
What's that?
KGB, Koreans Gone Bad?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's been over for like 7 years at least.
I know.
But I loved it, and it was just him and his friends, and I think it was clear, like, I said the word abuse, and then that's what I thought it was, just that he was just...
Sometimes he was awful.
But I always saw it as a character.
Well,
he's just screaming and yelling.
It was a character,
and
but
like,
what's the guy, his like friend that he was like so mean to?
I don't remember.
Oh, come on. There was like
comedian?
one... Yeah, the comedian. Because he was like
I forget his name.
He was like particularly mean, and it could be that the comedian... I wish I could remember his name.
Right
he has a podcast now too. It's horrible.
Oh.
I think it's old too. But he always seemed like he was like really hurt, and that like David Cho was like mean to him. But I think it probably was. But I don't know. It seemed a little bit real. Like David Cho seems like he kind of definitely crosses the line, and it seems like he knows he crosses the line, and I almost think sometimes he wishes he didn't. Do you ever feel like that?
I don't know. I think he doubles down, but I think it's because it's in... It's not that it's always in jest, but I think it's that in the situation he pushes himself. I don't really feel like I've ever felt regret from him. There's times where he's been a feature on someone else's podcast, like Joe Rogan's, and he's very different. Because he's not in the same setting. Mm-hmm. He talks just a lot differently.
Well, he's even talked like about his sexual escapades and stuff, and he really seems to feel like he is regretful there, because he'll never have a normal relationship again, he said.
I think there was you're right, and there's parts of him that have talked about like not having a family, and maybe that's something he wanted to do, and like...
Although, have you seen on his Instagram lately, his mom's on there?
I've seen her on there a little bit, she's funny.
Yeah.
Their relationship is interesting. I don't know, I just love his storytelling, but I also love, like, I don't think I would get joy out of talking down to people the way he does, like his friends, like in the KGB podcast. I like yelling, that's fun, but I don't necessarily like yelling at people and thinking that's fun.
Yeah.
But it's just, I like being loud and boisterous when I can, because I very rarely get to do so. And just the act of volume in itself makes me happy. But like, just the way that he, like I said, I think he's an amazing visual artist. Like, I love his work, but it doesn't seem important to me. He also, I feel like he's like a contemporary Renaissance man.
Yeah.
Like the podcast, storytelling elements. He's done TV shows, traveling shows. He's like friends with Anthony Bourdain and like all these other people, and like
I really like their interactions.
Yeah, I mean he can get. He's not. I don't think he's a shallow person. I don't think so either. That he's got so much depth to him, but his character is incredibly shallow.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's part of his appeal to me, is that he has the freedom to express those parts of him.
I was posting to her podcast, just in case.
I wasn't going to ask.
I was totally listening.
No, I'm sure you were. But it's that he has the freedom to, I think, explore and express all parts of him almost. Yeah. Obviously not everything.
And he's really open. Like he's really
incredibly open.
Yeah.
With things that you find embarrassing.
Actually. Yeah.
Like he's not afraid to be embarrassing. I'm sure he's got limits as to what he'll say and what he won't say, but I don't know what they are, because his line is so much further than mine. Yeah. But anyway, he inspires me just to like, and they said it's not always a good thing, because there's times when when I feel anxious or trapped or whatever, I'm like, I wish I was just David Cho. I was like, and when you said the factory, that reminded me, because he has like this warehouse.
Totally, I know.
He just goes around with garbage bags of paint, and like he drives in his warehouse, and just like I'm like, when I think about this space, like the whole floor, the whole gallery, I'm like, it's not even a quarter of the space he has, but I'm like, I could live in the space. I want to live like art. Like, I want to have almost like... I could not live his character 24/7. I probably couldn't live it as much as he does. But, like I said, it represents this thing of, like I said, I think he is the example of the rock star celebrity artist in contemporary times. And he's not as well known as some other ones that are...
I learned from him through like the Anthony Bourdain is how I found out about him, and just was sort of intrigued and stuff. And he's done some amazing portraits of Anthony Bourdain as well. Tony. Sad story. I miss him. But anyways, you've sent me a few times on Instagram where he's done the little videos where he paints and then he paints over it, and like those to me are inspiring, and again sort of give me that permission that that's okay, because I do that all the time, go too far in paintings and stuff. So I like watching sort of that process and how willing he is to let something go, and so yeah, I think he's got quite more of a depth probably than obviously at first blush.
Yeah. Well, like I said, to me, he's the modern Renaissance man too. I mean, his music too. He plays drums in a band, and he does.
Yeah, it's not that great though. Yeah.
Depends. It's not something I listen to. It's not something that I ever seek out listening to. It's just like.
It's good that he does have another outlet.
Yeah. And like, well, even the video stuff. I don't know if he's editing that.
Yeah.
But like, there's video collages.
Yeah.
That are like weird, and like he has like little people and like sexual stuff going on, and he's driving a car, and all of a sudden he's painting something, and then he's like yelling in the camera, and then it's like live footage of him playing. Like there's these video collages, and just there's so much stuff that he does so well. But the thing that he does that I can't say he lives well. I don't know how he feels. Is he happy? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I
don't know if he lives well really, but I mean because I think excess can be harmful, right? Yeah. Excess and not having any parameters really, which in a way he doesn't right now. So to me it sounds like from some different things that I've heard that he does have a bit of regret in that, because you get to a certain point and then you can't go back. You can't, some things you lose too much. I don't know. Anyways, I find him very interesting, problematic lots of times. He makes me cringe lots of times, and I absolutely really like him. I really like him a lot. So, and you turned me on to him, and I appreciate it. Yeah. I got another quick one. Susie Lake. She's Canadian. The first time she actually came to speak at the University of Lethbridge. Ooh. She does the project that she had been doing that time. She's done a ton of stuff. I'll just talk about this one project. And it was these huge advertisements, and they were like in bus shelters, in like the metro type things. I think she was from Toronto, but anyways, they were these big advertising slick things. She's a beautiful woman, and she was looked really beautiful in these pictures, and then when you got up close, because she was probably, when I met her, she was my age, she was 50. And then when you got closer, you saw she had hair growing out of her chin, which happens with these different hormones, different things that were happening that, she was older in the face. So just this presenting herself as something very commercial and slick and beautiful, but then showing these signs of aging and that sort of thing that you saw the closer that you got. So obviously that was an inspiration, probably even more so now. But it was really inspiring because you could sign up for studio visits whenever they had. It was really cool because you got some really cool artists that would come and look at your work. That was, anyways. So she came to my studio, and at that point I was doing some rants, and I had a rant sort of about beauty and different things like that, and she read it. She took it, and then she read it. And then she was like, get angrier. You need to, this part is amazing. You need to get angrier. But, she performed it. It was amazing. Oh, wow. Yeah. So, so that was, really inspiring. And sort of, I didn't need permission to get angry, but it was just amazing to have this really established performance artist and Canadian artist not only give me notes on my work, but to perform it. So, yeah, that was super cool. That was the days before iPhone, or I probably would have can I tape this? Yeah. But, which is probably good that I don't have it. It's probably good that that's just this lovely little memory that I have. But she's done a ton of work, and so I'm just sort of glossing over and just want to mention her name because I think she's important to my work.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just a quick little buzz.
So this is my last one.
Oh, no.
And then it's your last one.
No. Okay, so I got to pick one or the other?
Well,
okay.
yes. We're doing four. I know we figured that out before.
I know. I forgot.
Breaking the fourth wall.
I forgot.
That's okay.
All right.
Okay, so my last one is Jackson Pollock. This is I've mentioned him before too, and I don't think it's not a lot, so I don't remember what I've said exactly. But he's the I mentioned him. I think it was in part. No, it was the very beginning of this one. Never mind, not part one. Where I'm like, oh, I actually did some research one time, and so I didn't. I think it was pressed upon me by that same professor I was talking about to look into his work, or maybe I had no. Never mind. I just remembered that wasn't it. I had to do a very elementary do an artist research paper type thing. I had to do that on somebody. It wasn't as boring as that because I did through video and I spoke and just had little prompts like a PowerPoint type presentation. But I also did it alone to the instructor, I believe. I can't remember her name. Sandy something.
One-on-one?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I enjoyed it because I didn't want to do a whole class. But yeah, I got to do that. Like I said, it was better than, it wasn't just write an essay, but I mean the concept was just very pick an artist and whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't know if she suggested him for me or not, because I don't think it was an art history class.
Yeah.
She wouldn't have known my visual work, I don't think, that much unless she asked me, but it's been a while, I don't really remember.
Probably you could pick, right?
Well, absolutely I could pick, I just don't know if she's the one who was here, try this guy, or here's a list, or whatever. Because I didn't know much of his work. I knew the name, but I didn't really know a lot of his work. And I don't like his work is not aesthetically pleasing to me. I don't like I don't like the finished products. It's not about that. It's all about
well, and his work is all about process, really.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's not like you can't like both, the final outcome of one.
I bet you he would agree with you. I bet you he would like the process more than the finished
well,
product too.
Probably. But I mean, there's a point where he called something done, and because it was balanced enough and whatever. But anyway, I remember doing that research there, and then it is the single thing that influenced my work for a period of time anyway, or it had an influence on my work forever, or on me and as an artist and process and thinking about stuff, even if I don't necessarily work that exact same way, or now it's so natural to me that I don't think about it as much, but because it definitely influenced my whole BFA exhibition. I cited him specifically, and more specifically Clement Greenberg's words about him. So if you don't know that name, he's a famous art critic who was Jackson Pollock's the greatest American painter and that's ever happened and whatever. And he was the one who really, I think, founded the words for the abstract expressionist movement in a way. Just him talking about this is what abstract expressionism is. This is what art is now. Figurative stuff is out the window, whatever. So a lot of it was more of Clement Greenberg's words about Pollock than Pollock's own words about himself. There's some stuff that Pollock said that I have there, but I don't think I am going to read specific quotes. But just so yeah, again, it's not the finished pieces, like you said, it's process, and how he was saying that when he's in the painting, that's all that he's in it, physically in it, but also mentally, emotionally consumed in it. He's not really thinking; he's acting, and so. How Clement Greenberg had talked about his stuff too is that there was another critic that I cited as well, and I don't remember his name. So yeah, but it was the fact that the art itself was the process. That was the art, and what was left over was evidence of art. And I took that super literally, and I had an exhibition actually here in Lethbridge called Evidence, and have been playing with that notion of evidence and finding it very attractive, and taking photos or taking physical things and just collecting them, and that all started there with that is art. I found that when I was making my abstract work, that it's not I aesthetically liked the way my pieces looked, but the most important part to me was the fact that I was working something out while I was the first abstracts I did were so emotionally charged that the act was the most important thing for me because I let out what I had to let out. They weren't meant to be aesthetically pleasing. I wasn't picking, I just was I feel this and that, and a lot of them were only 3 colors, and that was black, white, and crimson. The first, I don't know how, small chunk of abstracts that I did. But yeah, the process was the most important thing to me too. That was whatever, and this was evidence of how I felt. So just that idea of how he thought about his art, how other people interpreted his art and talked about it, that really inspired my work then, and it helped me understand my own work. And then it pushed it even further with me collecting evidence and calling it evidence and being like, this is evidence of like, his whole thing was like, he didn't, like, there's film of him doing action painting and this drip work and stuff, but it wasn't like he was calling the film a piece of art. It was just someone documenting it. But that was the whole thing, was that you couldn't ever see the art, you just saw what was left over.
But there were so many things within a painting that showed the process. Like he would like you'd see like outline of a tin can or a cigarette or a footprint, or so like in the finished painting you saw the process.
Well, you saw the process,
to me, which is what I like, rather than just the finished painting.
Well, like it is part of the finished painting.
I mean, I guess all paintings are like that, but.
But I mean, his whole thing was like, this is the painting is the arena for whatever, for feeling or for expressing, and what's left over is evidence of that, of the art that took place that no one else could experience, because he was the only one in that moment, in that way. So then, I mean, like I said, with the evidence stuff, I took it as like, I'm finding physical evidence of when, and it wasn't always me, like I took a lot of...
you gather other people's evidence.
Yeah,
too.
I took a lot of photos when I was in university of evidence of like someone made art here. This was, and now this is art because it's documenting somebody else's like leftover evidence process. Yeah, and it was, some of that stuff was years and years old. Some of it was, that day or whatever. Some of it's been my stuff, whether it's been my clothes or like whatever. The reason I collected paint tubes and stuff like that. So yeah, I took that in two different ways, and one was helping me understand my own work when I was creating abstract work, and then also informing this notion of like, evidence is so inspiring just to look at, and that's why I sort of wanted to collect it. Like I said, I did way more photographs back then than I do now, and I don't collect as much stuff, but I feel so inspired by just collecting the physical evidence, or by looking at someone's evidence of art was here, like someone made something here, and that's magical. And it changed my whole frame of understanding my own work. And like I said, it'll probably inform the rest of, now that I have that touchstone that's so important to my practice. Like I said, I don't think of that when I'm making something anymore. Like it's not an academic thing for me like it was then, but it was this moment of absolute just like life-changing experience of like, holy crap, like I didn't understand even what I was doing. And like I said, now I'm not thinking of it consciously now, like when I'm making work, but it's definitely something I keep going back to, and not in the same way when I was making my BFA exhibition. It's not as directly tied and related, but I can't see, even 50 years from now, if I'm lucky enough to still be alive, like, and making work, that like, I can't imagine me not thinking like, I had this magical moment with Pollock that somehow still informs my work. So that's the most influential, inspirational kind of thing that I've had with Pollock. And again, it's not the finished pieces that I don't like looking at them. It's just how his process and how he thought about his process and how he thought about art and how others kind of wrote essays about it.
Cool. Yeah, he's a gooder. Okay, I have two that I want to talk about. So I'm just going to just mention Dana McLeod. She's also Canadian. She lives in Montreal. She just finished her PhD. She's on Instagram. Check her out. I found her when we had a feminist film festival, and we were looking for feminist films, and she had one called lesbian porn. Okay. And it's really, really good. She's someone who she's just really, really good and got a lot of depth. Queer artist, and just really good. One of the ones, and it's one of her older works, and but it's called Bathroom Tapes, and anyways, I really, really like her, and so I want to slide her in. It's called Bathroom Tapes.
No, what was her name? Dana?
Oh, Dana McLeod.
Okay.
And she's on, like I say, she's on Instagram. Actually, she's like Dana-rama, and maybe I'll put the link in the bottom,
Sure.
is her website, and you can see like a lot of stuff there. So she's very prolific, really interesting. She's friends with some people I know here, so we were in like a little documentary together, but she's really cool. The last persons that I want to mention, one is Kelly Andres. I mentioned her quick before. Her and I worked together for about a year, and it was so intense. She's exhibited all over the world. Used to live in Montreal for 10 years. We did our BFA at the same time, and then we had a year after that was like sort of during our year, and it was just intense, everyday art, thinking, talking together all the time, doing it. So making art, talking about theory, reading, drinking way too much wine, and it was just art. We carried around a video camera. We just like videotaped everything, every conversation. Like it was just so like entrenched in art and what art could be, and like everything was performance, and like every bit that we were doing, everything that we were taking was performance. And there were outcomes and there were exhibitions. We did an exhibition here at Trianon, but it just was this living this artist life, and it was really intense, and it was something that influences me now. I know what she says it does her as well. So it's finding, and now I find that with you, like we work so much together, we don't have that intenseness or the everydayness, usually every weakness, and then sort of, talking a bit online. But it's just having that person that is not the same, not that creates the same things, but that can challenge you and push you and inspire you, and so it's, to me, that's like really important. So I'm so glad that we found each other and that we can like inspire and share a studio space and have this. And so like I really cherish your inspiration and your encouragement and challenging me and pushing me and all those different things. So I find probably just as much, if not more, inspiration in the work that I did with Kelly, and now the work that we do together. We've actually physically done work together, but even just being in that same space, and it does inspire me. It's changed some of my work. It's made me think about my work and question it, like all different kinds of things. So it's something that I know even when you move away or we don't share a space anymore, that inspiration will still be there, and I'll still be thinking about those things and being challenged in different ways. And so, yeah, I'm like squeezing you two in, because that year I spent with her was, really special, and now the couple of years that we've known each other definitely have been really special and integral to my art practice. And it's been nice being able to have another artist to talk to things about, and you've been so generous with space. Yeah, so thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's something we've talked about before too, and like I haven't ever had like something that you had with Kelly before. Like I've collaborated with one other person before, very, very mildly, and it's just not the same thing. Whereas we were collaborating together in conversation and ideas, and like you said, challenge. It's such an important word, I think, to both of us. Way before you started painting, or before I had a space here, and then we started sharing space, and everything happened.
Yeah.
And I don't take that for granted at all either. Like it's been on a weekly or on a regular basis. It's been the thing that has, I think, inspired my work more, and because it's challenged me. There's been interaction. Whereas everyone else I've talked about, like it's not a two-way street.
Yeah.
It's like something happened and then it inspired a certain thing, or it gave me a certain feeling, or it's just nice to look at. But it's been magical. Like, I mean, I don't know, because I never thought, like, even the first time we're like, we should do a piece together. I'm like, no, I don't know how that's going to go. Like, I was really hesitant because of relinquishing control, and it's been super nice to do that. And so, like, seeing, I don't know, like before we started doing the visual art pieces, to me that's such a whole other thing than because we don't do that very often. There was like a little bit where we got into a rhythm and then we haven't gone back to it for a bit.
Yeah.
But But this, when even we were doing this before we had a podcast, before I started doing.
That's what we kept saying. We should have these conversations on a podcast. We should have, because I think we do have some great conversations, and and like you say, challenge is such an important word, but so is inspiration, and I guess challenge inspires me. Maybe that's why.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well.
So that's my list. I managed to like squish 2 in.
Yeah, no, it works.
But yeah.
Well, I don't know. We got, like you said, there's so many things now. We got to like remember it all and like write it down.
Well, I wrote some down.
Good.
Yeah. But no, this was I really enjoyed this podcast a lot, because it's nice, like sort of being re-inspired too.
Yeah.
Like when you think of different artists and sort of what's happened in the past, I really sort of was feeling re-inspired when I was sort of making a list and thinking about it, and and wrote down some ideas. So even just doing this, I've got a couple of ideas of things I want to do. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was super good. I feel like beforehand when you were just like, I just want to go make stuff now. I'm like, I've been feeling that way for the past like hour and stuff.
I know. Me
and I was like, I want to hold on to that feeling. So
yeah.
But for people listening and or watching, then I mean, if you want to share your thoughts on either the people we talked about, or give us people to look at.
Yeah.
Who are you looking at?
Yeah.
And like who informs your work, or if you don't do any work, I mean, who do you like? Like what are things like I would love to be exposed to more artists. Fortunate enough that while I was teaching, I had projects where students would have to do some artist research and that type of thing. And then I got to learn about artists I never knew of. It was like, this is amazing. Like I have people doing the research for me, and I'm like, oh, I'll just go follow them on Instagram now. But yeah, I'd love to hear about what other people have as some of their favorite artists or people that inspire them in any way. That would be tight. I would really enjoy that. Is that our artist life?
That's artist life.